Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. We are on episode 29. Can you believe it? We're almost reaching the 30 mark. And honestly, being on Buzzsprout and having them as my podcast host has made this whole experience so much easier. And I highly recommend this to anyone who wants to start their podcasting journey. Now, let's get into today's episode. My guest today is Diane Uwacu, originally from Rwanda and now studying in the USA. She is a PhD student in computer science at A&M University. In this episode, we learned that she gained a scholarship to study in the US for her tertiary education. And there, during her undergrad, she met great teachers who were well invested in her success and who noticed that she was good at algorithms. This then led to her pursuing her Ph.D. and currently she is a PhD student specializing in computational biology and machine learning. Her research is in designing motion planning algorithms applied in computational biology and robotics. So she tells us more about this research and also talks us through a typical day in the lab for her. We also touch on some tips and advice that she wished she had received when she came in a foreign country as an international student. So tune in to learn about all of this and so much more. Let's go. Hi, Diane. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on the podcast.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm excited to talk to you and just to let everybody get to know you more and just to hear about everything that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a real pleasure.
Well, in that case, let's get into it. So please tell us a bit about yourself, your age, where you're from, where you're currently based, and what you're currently doing.
Yeah, so I'm 27 years old and I'm originally from Rwanda. I'm pursuing a PhD degree in computer science at Texas A&M University. And currently I'm a visiting scholar at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign.
Wow. Okay, great. Well, before we get into your science and what you're doing, as you mentioned, you are originally from Rwanda, and Rwanda. So before we get into, you're from Rwanda, and in Africa, the country is becoming, the place to be, as sort, due to the technological advances and the policies which are being put in place by the government, which is really, really great. So with that being said, for someone like myself who's never been to Rwanda, where's that one place for you in the country that you would recommend for me to visit and why?
Yeah, so this is a tough vote. So I will go with my favorite thing that I try to do every time that I get a chance to go home. And it's taking a walk in the evening in Kigali. It's a pretty amazing experience. The weather is always good. The evening breeze is like the actual definition of good vibes. So,
wow.
Yeah, so my recommendation is to start at the American Embassy around 6 p.m. and walk from there to a bakery called Simba Supermarket. That's in front of the parliament. And so I won't give you the details of like what you see on that walk on the way. It's like there's plenty to see. I won't give you the details because I don't want to spoil anything for you. But yeah, I can tell you that if you do this with friends, it will be like one of the fondest memories in your repertoire. If you do this by yourself, it'll be equivalent to like 1 hour of meditation. So I'll absolutely recommend it.
Wow, now I want to go to Rwanda. Like, universe, God, please make it happen. I will let you know once I do that. And this is saved so I can always come back to it. I love it. It sounds so beautiful. do you miss home?
I do very much. So on average, I get to go every 2 years, but like by the time I go, I'm almost dying.
Sure. 2 years
Yeah.
is a long time. 2 years is a long time. So before we get into further, you mentioned that you don't go home. You only go home twice. I mean, every 2 years. So.
Yeah.
You left Rwanda to go study in the US at a pretty young age, right? So tell me about your experience as an international student, and also just touch on some of the things that you wish you'd have known to make this transition easier.
Wow, yes, this would probably be my favorite question. So the list is long, but to be brief, I'll only talk about the main 4 things that I wish I had known. First, I wish someone had told me about the importance of internships and how to get one as an international student. So, depending on the school that you go to, the career services and at the school might not be equipped to guide international students, and local companies in your community might not be well versed in the paperwork that's involved and all of that. And some people don't like to deal with it. So I wish someone had told me to be bold and apply to bigger companies, international companies and that. The second one is I wish someone had talked to me about the importance of a credit score. So
Okay.
Yeah, so I assume that American students, they probably learn about personal finances in high school. So in college, it's not talked about enough. And a credit score in here is very important because it's a measure of how credit worthy you are, which comes in handy if you are negotiating any type of interest rate. So I wish that I had learned that earlier, because the sooner you start building your score, the better, because history is part of the factors that go into the score calculation. So it's that's just that financial knowledge for America that would have been helpful. The third one, I wish someone had told me about the importance of a driver's license. So I know this might seem trivial now because of services like Lyft and Uber, but I assure you, there's always an advantage to learning a new skill anyway. But it's about safety as well. So I would recommend that you go to a driving school instead of learning from a friend. The lessons, they don't take that much time, they don't take that much money, and it's very crucial to your own safety as an international student living in a country by yourself with no family most of the time. It comes in handy. The last one, which is definitely not the least, is something about the importance of mentors. I was fortunate to come through a structured scholarship program. So several people approached me with some free advice, right? I would recommend that you be proactive about it. Whenever you meet someone whose career matches some of your goals, I would encourage you to step out of your comfort zone and make contact, because there's always something to learn from those kinds of people, and there are so many tips that you actually need to learn, and you won't learn that if you don't connect with the right people. So this will be my top 4, but the list goes on and on.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And like you said, being an international student is a different ball game, and I think most of the people who are local in that country never really take that into consideration. So exactly. First of all, you were very brave for coming out on your own, and those are very important things. I like how you mentioned in your first one where you said that the importance of internships. I think there's always that thing of where if you're an international student, there's a lot of red tape that doesn't allow you to get the same access as the local students. I'm also speaking on my own experience here in South Africa as well. because, and like you said, people and the administrative staff don't like to deal with it because it's just
yeah.
there's just so much. Yeah, there's just so much red tape involved. But yeah, that's some really good lessons, and I hope anybody who's listening can take some notes on everything that you said.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So anyway, you mentioned you came to the US on a scholarship, right? But before all of that happened, let us know what actually led you into science. What are some of the influences? You know, did you always know that you wanted to be in this field, or was it something that happened to you? A person who you knew got you in? So, like, what is the root of your science?
This is a great question. So I originally wanted to become an archaeologist. And
okay.
Because like growing up, I loved history books and like archaeological TV series. And I believed, I was convinced that I was great at recounting history to my peers. But so the way that the education system is set up back home is that after the first 3 years of high school, a student has to choose a combination of 3 courses to concentrate on for the following 3 years. So as you can imagine, the combination you choose is going to influence the kind of majors that you can pick in college. So it's kind of like early picking of a major. So when I got to that point, I was torn between choosing, math, biology, and chemistry, or history, geography, and math. And like any African parent, with self-respect, my mom, of course, helped me with that decision.
Sciences.
So that's how I ended up with math, biology, and chemistry. Fortunately, I was good at that, and that's how I was awarded that scholarship that I was talking about, to study science or engineering at Oklahoma Christian University. And there I met some incredible teachers who were well invested in my success, and they helped me realize that I was pretty good with algorithms in particular. And so that's why I declared my major to be computer science. I'm very sure that if I had not had been in the kind of classrooms that I was in undergrad, I probably wouldn't have had the confidence to choose a computer science major. So I'm thankful for that part. And then deciding to pursue grad school, it came mainly from the fact that I will have always loved educating others, like I said earlier with the history stuff. So I was fortunate to have enough experience with research when I was still in college, through like summer internships. And so I had enough experience that I was able to decide to go to grad school like right after. Yeah.
Okay. That's very interesting. I just want to touch on something in the beginnings of your career. You said that you wanted to be an archaeologist. And do you think there's something a little bit at fault, if I can say, with the education system where it forces a very rigid approach? Like you said that you wanted to be an archaeologist, but you had to pick between that or the sciences, that there's no like wiggle room where you can kind of be in both. Because I also had that thing as well when I was choosing my majors. And of course, like you said, all African parents tell you maths, physics, chemistry, biology, that's what you have to do. But I also had a deep love for history. So, it's quite, do you think that there's something a little bit at fault with that kind of system that really forces you to pick in a very square box about who you can be and what you can be for the future?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. On one hand, I think the good thing about science is that you can apply it to different applications. So in a sense, it's like science itself, science itself is not that limiting. And that's part of the argument that my mom made with me when she was convincing me. Like, well, if it's really your passion, let's go into the sciences, because that opens more doors. Because then later on you can apply it to whatever you want to apply it to. But I do agree with the point that you're making, that we kind of get to make those choices very early on. And, you're 14, 15, and already you are making that decision of that's going to potentially decide what you're going to
whole
go
entire life.
Later, later in college and in your career. So I see that part. But thankfully for sciences, if you are the kind of student who's good with science and you go that route, then there is some hope that you can catch yourself later on in life. But yeah, I don't know. It's a complicated question to.
Yeah, no, that one is a little bit of a spanner in the works, and I think there's no wrong or right answer in that. Everybody's got a valid point for and against it. But just back to you, since you took your parents' advice, and here you are, you got the scholarship. Like you said, that you had wonderful teachers who invested in your potential. So for undergrad, you went into computer science, right?
Yes.
And then postgrad, what did you do for postgrad in terms of your master's before you got into your PhD?
So I actually went directly to my PhD. Yeah.
Okay, explain that to me. How did that happen?
So when you apply, you can make a choice. Yeah, if from undergrad, that you want a PhD eventually, like that you are joining for the purpose of doing research. You can directly apply to the PhD program. And so what they do is that your first 2 years are going to be heavy with classes, but you're going to do a little bit of research just to get started. But you're going to focus on classes, and then continue with the research. Eventually, it takes around the same amount of time as someone who goes into the master's program. It's mainly taking classes and then applying to PhD later on. So like if you look at the two options, maybe you gain a year by going directly to the PhD in some cases.
With going directly into the PhD, did you need to be of like you had to achieve a certain mark, or can anybody just apply to go straight into that that stream?
Oh, that's a good point. So the application to the PhD program is tougher. It's more selective because you need to prove that you have an interest in a specific research area, that you know enough to really be interested. So you need to show that maybe you've done some research before, you have some experience, or that you've been reading about that area before. So you need to prove that you are really interested. And then they're a little bit more picky on the quality, because they want to select the kind of person that they believe is going to succeed through the program. And they know that they're selecting you from undergrad. So
yeah,
it's a little bit more selective than a master's program. And typically, a PhD, it's rare to pay for your PhD. So if they are selecting you, they are pretty much, paying for your education. So it's then a little bit more picky with that.
No, but it's impressive. And congratulations for getting through the selection process. So currently you are a PhD student at Texas A&M, and you're specializing in computational biology and machine learning algorithms. So your research work is designing motion planning algorithms applied in computational biology and robotics. Specifically, you work with topology-guided methods to predict the accessibility of complex environments. So, can you just explain to us in simplified terms what your research is doing and why is it so important?
Great. Yeah. I commend you for reading all those.
Yeah, I was really trying.
Yeah, good job. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me try to explain in layman terms, and you can tell me if it makes more sense or how I do. So motion planning, plainly defined, is an algorithm that gives you a valid path for a movable object to move from a start position to a goal position. Now, intuitively, from this definition, we imagine robotics and navigation. And yes, motion planning algorithms are used in that way, but they are also used to guide, for example, how specific tasks can be achieved. So like grasping something or assembling different parts and things like that. So these algorithms are quite important in the industry. The second application, which is my favorite application, is in biology. And I'm interested in the problem of how ligands, like drug molecules, for example, interact with proteins in our body. So when they are screening drug candidates, one of the criteria that biochemists look for is that the small molecule called the ligand can be docked into the protein's active site. And this is what in high school we learned was analogous to a lock and key situation. So basically, loosely meaning that for an interaction to happen, the shape of the ligand has to match the shape of the protein. So you can imagine this as a motion planning problem, like I said, in which a ligand is thought of as a moving object or a robot, that's attempting to access the active site of a protein. So in this case, validity or a valid path is based on some calculated energies. And this research is very important because bringing in the speed of computing to the pharmaceutical industry will fasten the drug manufacturing process. And also it'll make it possible to design more specific drugs that can interact with the target protein and not cause side effects by interacting with other non-intended elements. So it is a step in the right direction of personalized medicine and all these great things that we dream of for the future. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So is this in its advanced stage? Is this being applied in pharmaceuticals currently now, or is it still something that you're planning towards?
Oh, yeah. So actually, there are a lot of softwares, for example, that predict protein ligand. It's called binding. So that the interaction between a drug molecule and the protein. So there are a lot of softwares out there that are already starting to emerge that predict protein ligand binding, that predict a binding site. Like if you have a protein that you don't know anything about, there are softwares that can help you predict with a level of confidence, of course, help you predict, where the binding sites might be, based on energies and the landscape. So yeah, it's being used, starting to be used, but there's a lot of work left to be done to improve the accuracy of those predictions, and that's why this research is still needed.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. It sounds like it'll be cutting edge. I love how the world is moving to all of this type of stuff. It's very interesting. So just to give us more of an idea, can you explain to us a typical day for you, for example, in the lab? We can say this before COVID-19 happened, because I think now it's a little bit different. So what would a typical day look like, and what was the best part for you?
Oh wow. So a typical day. So I get to the lab between 9 and 10 a.m. And I chat with my lab mates for a while before diving into work. So in the morning, I usually do something that requires a concentrated mind. So as much as possible, I try to take my lunch outside the building to get some fresh air. And then in the afternoon, I usually work on something that doesn't require too much concentration. So like I debug some code, or I run experiments for testing. And then also, so my advisor is involved in an administrative role. So she's usually available after working hours, which is usually after around 5. So we have a group meeting, which consists of someone in the lab. One of the lab mates presents their research update, or they share a paper from outside that's related to the work that we are doing in the lab. So we share ideas with the student, we discuss the next steps, and then I get home between 6 and 7. If I were to pick a favorite part of my day, it would actually have to be the time in the morning before I get to the lab. And so I usually wake up around 6 and I spend the first hour of the day just taking it easy. I listen to my favorite song. These days it's Here Comes the Sun, but that my favorite song changes depending. So sometimes I exercise, sometimes I make a phone call, I just write something in my journal. Like whatever comes to mind, I try to not structure that first hour. And I like it like that, to kind of give myself that sense of not waking up feeling busy already. So I really cherish my first hour in the morning.
So it's just like a time for yourself, and just before you get into the real world of everything that you do. So, being in the field of science, there's immense reward, like in conceiving an idea and seeing it to fruition, and then watching the research community embrace it and appreciate everything that you've done. However, this is very rare. It's very rare that you have this beautiful picture. The everyday life of research, like you said, is often marred with self-doubt, writer's block, for writing all these journals, for the journals and for the publications, and rejections, if you're applying for something. So, what are some of your coping mechanisms for those days which happen to most of us more often than not?
Yes. Oh, man. So first, I would like to say that I'm still growing in this area. So my answer might actually change if you ask me again a few months from now. But so when I get a paper or any other kind of application rejected, I allow myself to be sad and just take it in. And I then plan for a celebratory dinner that day. I take myself out, or I cook a nice meal for myself. I get a glass of wine, take a shower, and I just try to celebrate the parts that are true about what's happening. Like, for example, the hard work that I put in, the recommendations that I got, the courage that it took me to submit in the first place. So I try to, focus on the positive things about that. And then the next day, I take a serious look at the critics and I make a plan for where to go from there. I like this so far. It's been working for me because I actually am not as defensive when I read the reviewers' comments the following day, because I think mentally I've already, given myself that pat on the back, like, hey, you did great. It did not work out, but you did great. So then the following day, when I'm reading the critics, I respond to them better than I used to.
Wow.
So for the boredom of the routine, I think it has gotten better the more social I've become within the department and with my lab mates. So when I'm at the stage where there isn't much happening in my personal project, I'm just, for example, in the middle of implementing something. I don't have any experiments. I don't have any, nothing interesting is happening. I get to chat about someone else's projects or for example, mentoring undergrad students who are interested in research, and they sometimes come to the lab, to get a sense of what research feels like. So being a mentor to undergrad students is an activity that keeps things lively in the lab, and you get to answer questions and also feel good seeing someone learning. But mostly, I would say all of these things are just the coping mechanism, like the things that I do. But I think at the base is my faith. I would say the main foundation for surviving in the program, because I know that there must be some, higher purpose for me being here. So when I feel weak or deep down, I know deep down that it's just an episode, but there's a bigger show. And, I try to focus on that whatever is going on, it's just temporary, but there is a bigger purpose. And I think that's why I try to find all these small things that I can technically do to lift myself up again. Yeah.
No, I love that. It's really good to have a way to cope with these hard times. Because like you said, they will come. They will come. And sometimes you have to realize that, it's a journey. It's part of the journey. It's how you learn. It's how you grow. It's how you get better. So I love it that you've got all these different things that you're coping, especially like what you said, where you give yourself a celebratory dinner. I love that idea.
Yeah, it has worked wonders for me. Yeah, and like you're saying, failure is necessary for growth. And so the more you go through rejections, the more you learn to respond better on them. So yeah, there's that too. I just trying to send a word of encouragement to whoever might be listening, and they just probably got their first rejection, and it really feels hard. It's hard to take in, and you can take it personally, but it does get better the more you get used to it, and things will be accepted too. So yeah.
The highs will also come. So what's next for you? After you finish the PhD, have you thought that far, or are you still like, I'm just trying to finish? And have you thought about I'm going to stay in academia, continue, in lining with working with the undergrads and your mentorship, or would you like to go work in industry?
Wow. So yeah, I have always loved teaching, and I think that's even one of the main motivations that got me into grad school in the first place. So yeah, when I think about myself in the future, down the line, I hope that I'm in some, teaching capacity somewhere. However, by now, I think that I can use a break from academia for
yeah.
I've been in school since, forever. So, yes, I think my answer is both. I think I can use a break, but I definitely would like to, career-wise, I think I'll be happier teaching or educating in some capacity.
I understand. So, just to wrap it up for us, to everybody who's listening, what is that final token words of wisdom that you'd love to impart to a young person or just anybody, even in grad school, who's going through their studies, who's in STEM, and anybody else who might be interested to get into STEM or into your field particular? What words of wisdom would you like to leave?
Wow. So for people who are interested in STEM, I would say give it a try now. I would say it's really worth checking out. Like we're saying, like we see in the news everywhere, STEM is playing a big role in deciding the future and you know, driving us into the future. So one thing that I strongly believe in is that we need more representation in STEM. So wherever you are, like wherever you are, wherever you come from, those people, they need someone to represent them into the future. So not only for yourself, but even for your community, you are needed to at least check it out and see if it's for you. Then it's a win for a lot of people, more than you. I would say if you're interested specifically in research or like taking it further, reach out to researchers around you. Like I said before, I get to mentor undergrads, even high school students sometimes. So there must be around you, there must be a professor or someone who'll be open to take you under their wings and show you a little bit what it looks like. You know, what does research look like for a electrical engineer? What does research look like for computer science? What does a lab look like? I think a lot of, at least for me growing up, I imagined chemistry labs and biology labs. I never thought of, you know, a computer scientist being in a lab. What does that even mean? So the earlier you get to see that, the better. So I would say, you know, reach out to people in your community. If there's a school, if there's a university close by, even if there isn't, ask the adults in the community, and they can, maybe they'll point you to a place, which kind of comes back to the idea of having mentors who could connect you to the right people. For maybe if you're in undergrad and you're already in STEM or I would say, make sure that you understand the basics and understand them beyond just getting an A in class. Otherwise, you won't be able to be creative. And research is about creating ideas in any capacity. I can just speak to computer science because that's where I'm at. And like I said before, like we design algorithms that guide robotics, that guide, you know, biology, that guide these different applications. But we design these algorithms. And in order to do that, you need to have a strong knowledge base, right? Like understanding of what's already been done and how far are we in general for you to be able to be creative and push a little bit further in that domain. So it's very important to basically focus on your studies and make sure that you are understanding and that you are asking yourself questions and that you are paying attention beyond just getting a good grade. So those are my 3 things for like beginners. Just give it a try. Even if you're in high school, I don't know how many high school students tune in to listen to the podcast, but wherever you're at, you know, there's no wrong time to jump into STEM or, you know, give it a look. It's worth it. If you're interested in research, reach out to the researchers. It's always exciting, at least I can speak for my lab. It's always exciting when a young student or a young person who wants to try.
Learn more.
Learn more. We always
and
want
like
to mentor.
And I think also, like you said about coming into STEM, we love getting people into STEM. So come into STEM. I get it. I get so excited. But it's been lovely chatting with you. Thank you so much for just letting us just get in to know you better, for us to know more about your research, and for you to just imparting some of these words of wisdom. It was really well appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. I really love this podcast. I think you're doing God's work.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's very needed. So I'm very honored to be here. Yeah.
No, it's been lovely having you. Thank you so much for the kind words. And to everybody else who's listening, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl, and with an E. Until next time, bye.